carried. The next item is item 5, vacant central city land differential and remission. That was the one that I thought that we were dealing with for a minute, so I apologise. So
Yep.
You would like to speak to that?
Yep.
Yes,
So again, the proposal is a new rates differential on central city land with no active or consented use, and a new remission where the land is kept in an improved and maintained state or there is a delay in processing consent fee. So we have a couple of comments on that, but I'm just going to flick to this next slide because I think a picture paints 1,000 words, so to speak. For the public's benefit, we showed this to the councillors a couple of briefings ago, but this is actually how the vacant central city land process actually works. So if you have a normal consented or active use that's consented, as in the first picture on the right, then you won't get charged this differential. If you don't have an active or consented use, but you keep it in an improved and maintained state, which is the middle picture, then you will actually receive a remission for that. It is the ones we are targeting is the ones on the right that are not. The only difference we have made to the amendment we have made to the proposal since the draft is the fact that we've also included a remission for those if there is a consent in to be processed and because it's our delays, because obviously you're aware that we are very busy in that area, then we will also consider the remission in that situation.
I think that's an incredibly useful slide.
Yeah.
So just pop it back up for a minute, because I think it's really useful for people to see that this is not being applied to a site that may even be being land banked.
Correct.
But it's actually put into the sense of public realm.
Correct.
That gives it a use within the city in the meantime.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So now, if we can go to the recommendations, we've got. Can you scroll? Yeah. So we've got 2 sets of recommendations being moved by Councillor Goff, seconded Councillor McClellan, and then we have an additional recommendation, which I'll put separately, to look at the directing staff to carry out further work as well with respect to extending the vacant central city land proposal to other areas of the city. And when we're talking about, and that's why I wanted to focus on the images, because we're not talking about vacant land, we're talking about vacant land that's left looking pretty shabby and not really adding value to the areas where it's located. So that's what we're talking about there.
Correct.
Okay. James.
So just 2 questions. First,
2 questions, right.
Yes, someone else will need to move 1, just because the point of 2 was to say that I supported it being extended to derelict buildings, but I wasn't comfortable with the vacant central city land differential in its current form. So I was fine with the work being done to extend it to derelict buildings, but not with 1.
Okay, well that's a misunderstanding on my part. So so maybe we can.
That's easy enough. I'm sure there was.
The one you say it's you and the.
It just means that there needs to be another mover and seconder. So that was the first question. Can someone else move 1 because I don't agree with it? But the second question is, where did we get to in workshops? I'd raised around sites that had consents that were currently underway. Where did we get to with that? With whether they would be
they are the
subject to it or not?
2 and 1.
Yes.
So that is
Where it
included in
says
that.
remission to deal with consent delays and clarifying under development, that is picking up the very issues we discussed.
So it's, if there is a consent that has been lodged, that qualifies.
Well, let's.
I just want. I know. I'm sorry. I just want to be really clear.
Yeah, that's
on
right.
it.
So if there's a consent that's been lodged
Yes.
and there's a delay that's caused by council,
Yes.
and if it's reasonable to think that if it had been processed according to the time frame, original time frames, the owner could have avoided the the higher differential. then there will be a remission.
So hypothetically, not that this would ever happen a lot, but say on the 19th working day or something like that, council were to ask a question that was already answered in the consent and then reset the clock, would that be the applicant's fault or the council's fault?
I think that, I guess there's a question, if a question got asked of a applicant and it took the applicant a very long time to respond to that, then we might ask really whether that was a council delay. But I think, we can be pretty, we're going to be pretty reasonable, I imagine, in how we interpret that. Yeah.
Okay.
Melanie.
Two questions. One is about the third resolution. Will that have beginning 1st July 2023 on that as well as it originally did?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, with a view to, yeah. Is that
Yeah.
right?
yeah,
Same thing. So we'll do some more work for next year.
and second question, which sort of is related to James's, if a piece of land has got a resource consent, but then nothing's happening on it for many years, that would not get a remission. Is that correct?
So, if it has a resource consent, that I think the term that we use is fully implemented, and that is in the rating policy itself. In our rating policy, we say who pays the higher this higher differential, and one of the ways that you can avoid paying the higher differential is that if you have a consent that is for a permanent development, if you have commenced permanent development like construction, or if you have a temporary use that has a consent that has been what we call fully implemented. Now, so if you've been sitting on a consent for years and years and done nothing, I would say that is not fully implemented. But again, we're going to be really reasonable about this, reasonable as we can in our interpretation. So, for example, if someone has just had a consent for a temporary use, like a car park, I would imagine we would say, if they just haven't quite had time to fulfill the conditions, then I think we'd give that to them.
Yeah, so I'm more looking at it from the other perspective, where
Yeah.
there's been a resource consent for 3 to 5 years or something, and they've renewed it, and they haven't
That's not fully
actioned anything yet because they're waiting to see
Yeah,
whether they do or not.
yeah, that's not fully implemented, so
Great.
they would pay the higher differential.
Excellent, thanks.
Okay. Right, so Jake's moving number 1. Do I have a seconder for the proposal? Melanie? All right. So I'll just deal with, I'll just put them separately probably. So is there any debate?
When we do, anyone wants to debate these, are we debating essentially all three of them, then you'll put
Debating
them
all
separate?
3, yeah. Do you want to speak to it?
No one else? Yeah. Or whoever's moved it might want to open it or anything, I guess. But
No. Jake, did you want to speak to the motion?
No, actually, I don't.
All right. James.
yeah, I will. So obviously we're putting these three separately. 1 and 3 relate to the vacant land. 1 essentially applies it to the central city. 3 are staff to look at applying that citywide. And 2 is obviously around extending to derelict buildings. I'm supportive of the derelict buildings, not so much the vacant land one. I think there are just too many question marks that have been raised throughout the submissions process around where we draw that line, what qualifies, what doesn't. I do hear staff and appreciate the comments that will be reasonable with that, but I think even as a councillor that's gone through many workshops and read a lot of documents on this, I still get the sense that there is a lack of clarity there, and I'm not sure that I have the utmost confidence that that line will be clear then for people that are in the community, when I still think there's a lot of question marks even around the table for that. Look, fundamentally why I support it being applied to derelict buildings and not the vacant land is that I don't think that really the vacant land is the issue. I think fundamentally the problem in our city around what's stifling regeneration is a number of things. But first and foremost, it's derelict buildings. We have an opportunity to directly tackle that, and that's where I think our best efforts would be best spent. There are a range of other issues: inflation, cost of construction, lack of supplies, a labour shortage, high interest rates, lack of foot traffic, lack of tenants, and dare I say it, consents. We've been looking at reports recently where we're only able to process 30% of consents within the maximum time frame that's statutorily allowed. I'm not making this stuff up. This stuff isn't political. It's not ideology. It's just reality. So putting a policy in place that penalises people with vacant land, and yes, there is some criteria around it which could waive the application of it to some people, I still just don't think that that's hitting the right target. If you think the impediment to positive development in the city is because there is a problematic level of people laughing in the face of making a return so they can instead pay holding costs and land bank, well, I'm sorry, you're just wrong. That's not the issue. I can actually think of more examples where this council has held land that it doesn't have any use for at all in the short or medium term than I can think of those in the private sector where this has occurred. Like how many years did we hold on to the strip of land beside the art gallery after base isolating it? Or how many years did we hold the former convention centre site for? Do you know what the confirmed plan is for the former Crown Plaza site? You don't, because there isn't one. So many councillors in this room have voted not to sell surplus council land in Hallsville on the basis that there might be a use for it one day, despite our own staff recommending that it be sold due to it being surplus to requirement. So I think there are many factors hindering development, but land banking, isn't one of them. So derelict sites, in my view, should be within the council's laser focus of addressing it. And I think there is an opportunity to do that in recommendation 2, so I'm happy to support that. But I think that the broad brush solution to a problem that doesn't exist around land banking for vacant sites is just misguided. So I won't be supporting 1 or 3, but I will be supporting 2.
I've just asked staff to put back up the image that I had up before, or staff had up before. And I just want people to focus their attention on the middle picture. There is no differential that's going to apply to that site. And that's because the owners of that site have made a contribution to the public realm of our city. And they have made this a pleasant and accessible site. The public artwork, or the street art that sits at the back, the Ototahi building, it's outstanding. The people in St Asaph, Litchfield, Tuam, the Salt District, self-named, self-promoted, and actually businesses coming together to make a huge difference there. That's what we want to see in our city, because we're not stopping people from putting off their development plans for the future. We're just saying, if you do, make it look like it's part of our city in the meantime. And that's what this is about. The number of people who made submissions to this council over and over again and said, do something about that site that's on the right. That is over and over again parts of our city. And they don't care about the city. They aren't really making it okay for people to put up with what's happening in the interim until there's a development happening. And that's the difference that this rate is designed to achieve. Has it been, a challenging issue for some people to confront? Are there different views in terms of the legal challenges that we might face? There is significant debate going on in Auckland at the moment as one of their rate differentials is being looked at. I just think that the people of Christchurch spoke to us overwhelmingly in the submissions, and they said, do something about just making the place look good in the meantime. And gee, what a difference when you can sit down with a landowner, as council staff have painstakingly done, site by site. And as they've approached business people who have been willing to make a difference, look at the site on the corner of Hereford Street, Colombo Street and Cathedral Square. That site couldn't be developed as it was intended because of COVID and the utter breakdown of the tourism market for that particular owner. He sold the site, the new owner came in and he said, yep, let's make it decent for the people of Christchurch in the meantime. They are rewarded by this, they are not penalised by it. So that's my contribution to the debate. Sarah.
Thanks for that. And the slides do make it super clear about what will and what won't be incorporated. And we have, let's not forget, we have over the last decade had substantial carrots for people to develop in the central city. We have had development contribution rebates for those developing both residential and commercial. We have had lots of carrots. We have done lots of one-on-one work with landowners and a range of things to try and get people making their sites look good, make them safe, and to help them develop in the central city. For some, that hasn't been enough. Not quite enough, bunches of carrots. And so, unfortunately, we sometimes need to use a bit of stick, but this has been the last resort, if you like, after significant carrots. People have been coming to us saying, please make our city look better. It's really poor for our central city when it looks so bad. I'd like to thank staff for the work that they've done on this and for taking into account the various submissions and concerns of those who do hold land and being really flexible. And I do have every confidence in our staff that they will apply this really reasonably and with great alacrity. But what I don't have confidence in is the number of central city landowners who are sitting there with currently unconsented, undeveloped, unimproved land, and I don't have confidence that without a little bit of a stick, they will do the right thing and do what's best for our city. Thanks.
Andrew.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to be the mover of option 3, and I would draw people's attention to the wording of it, to do further work and to report on options. So it's very broad in terms of next steps. That will provide the clarity which is sought. It will allow for any misunderstandings or misgivings or unintended outcomes to be taken into account. Vacant land in suburban areas is an issue right the way across the city. It's a long-standing issue. Because I see them most often, Littleton and Sydenham would be the first places that come to mind when I think of vacant land in suburban centres. And there may well be good commercial reasons or reasons around development economics that development is not taking place on certain sites around the city. London Street in Littleton is a really good example. There are so many vacant sites, long-term vacant sites on that street, which is the centre of the town. If this resolution allows us to begin to unlock that, either from a permanent development point of view or even a public amenity temporary use viewpoint, with the exact options to do that yet to be determined, then I'm definitely in favour of it. And people sitting around the table will be visualising and thinking of other parts of the city as I say this. If we keep on what we're doing in the suburbs, then we just keep on getting what we've got. If we look at options to do something different, then we may well be able to get a decent development outcome or at least a decent intervention outcome for Littleton, for Sydenham and some other areas, and I totally support that. If it's good for the central city, then it's also good for our suburban centres. The glaring example for me for recommendation 2 is the Mitre Hotel in Littleton, and I've had more than a small amount of correspondence on that over the years. It'll be one of the first buildings that cruise ship passengers on 80 ships visiting from the month of October this year will see. It's derelict, it's got broken windows, it's got bits falling off it, and it's taking up public space. It is not what we want the image of our city to be, any more than the derelict buildings standing in the central city are. What's relevant and what's good for the central city is also relevant and good in the suburban areas. We need to move on from derelict sites wherever they are, but an acceptable part of our city landscape. I therefore totally support these additional recommendations, and I'm pleased to see us planning to do some work towards acting in these important spaces.
Anyone else? Celeste.
The vacant sites differential is about supporting landowners to do the right thing by providing a remission for improvements and activation of vacant land. Those landowners who do not make improvements or have an active consent will pay higher rates, which is a fair thing to do. As some submitters have pointed out, we also need to look at how we can support developers to move forward by removing any roadblocks to get stalled projects across the line. So this also means we need to work together to encourage the right kinds of activation across our city in urban areas. I'm also supportive of doing further work to apply this scheme to our suburban areas, and that includes New Brighton and some others. Which is also about encouraging activation improvement of vacant sites to discourage any sort of bad faith land banking. What is clear is when these sites are left in a state of neglect for a long period of time, this actually has a negative impact on residents and our community. Ultimately, it's about working together to remove barriers to progress and supporting collective efforts to move our city forward in a positive way. So I'm supportive of these resolutions.
Sam.
Yeah, just really quickly, I won't support 1 or 3, but I'm happy to support 2. And I think it's been quite an interesting debate and quite useful in some respects. But I sort of noted there was a lack of some of the points that were raised, a lack of confidence in property owners in the CBD. And you kind of think about what they went through during the earthquakes and what a lot of them have gone through over COVID in the last couple of years and the support they've given.
Point of order. Misrepresentation, what I said, it was only some who are currently not doing things, not all property owners in the CBD.
That's actually
It's a misrepresentation.
It's not a point of order.
Misrepresentation
It's not a
is...
point of order. No, it's not. No, it's not a point of order. I mean, it is, yeah. Cool. It's not a point of order, so carry on.
Well, I do apologise if I've misinterpreted what you've said, but I literally wrote down the lack of confidence in property owners in the CBD. The second one was around intervention, which I think should be a scary word for the council. And I think the other one is around looking at the use of a stick, not a carrot. And I think if you fundamentally look at it, we're kind of dealing with property rights. If people own land, they've been through significant challenges, the market will determine when they can develop a site. They're not sitting on it because they can't make money out of it. They're sitting on it because they don't often have tenants that they can put onto a building. So I just think we need to add a bit of realism into the environment we have in Christchurch. And if we're looking at using a carrot, the carrot we could do would be to, maximise the amount of people that we can get into the CBD to spend money to support business. The more we can grow it, the more they will develop these sites. So I just think we need to be really careful when we're looking at penalising people who have actually been through pretty difficult times. And while they may have assets within the CBD, there are struggles around cash flow, and we've seen that for the last couple of years.
Okay. Tim Scandrett.
Yeah, look, thank you. I'm supporting all 3, and the example I'll give you is Sydenham. Early on, I worked with the late Lou Summers to put 3 artworks on 3 blocks of land. 2 of those blocks of land were at the entrance of both ends of Sydenham, 1 was in the middle. Those landowners were totally supportive of what we were doing and assisted us. As time went on, the one at the north end has now been developed. The one at the south end is being developed into a car park with plantings, etc. And the one in the middle has been developed into a park. So technically you could say that 2 haven't been developed, but they certainly have been upgraded, and one in the middle is used by the locals for lunches, etc. And then only 1 site has been developed. So time will allow the owners to develop as they can. But it's about making sure that those entrances into our city and within our city don't look like dump sites. And that's quite frankly what that picture on the right does, and this is what this is trying to stop. It's not forcing anyone to develop, It's just doing something for the city, as we all should. So I'll support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Jake, would you like to close the debate?
Yeah, happy to. I just wanted to thank our staff for coming up with a really novel and creative approach to solving what has been a huge challenge for our city over the last decade. You know, I reject the idea that this is overly punitive. It's a contribution. I think we as a city, every ratepayer and citizen of Christchurch has made a contribution, you know, by offering incentives for people to develop in the CBD and by subsidising that. And actually landowners have a responsibility as well, you know, and while it won't be appropriate in every case to get on and fully develop every piece of land, that's not an excuse not to maintain a tidy section. You know, that's the least that really should be expected. And I think it's also a real shame that people that were so supportive of this policy from the beginning have really done a U-turn, and that's really that's not the type of confidence that we need to give the organisation. Thank you.
Right. Well, I'm going to put the motion probably just individually. So I'll put one. It's been moved by Councillor McClellan, seconded by Councillor Coker. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. That is carried.
Any requests for votes against?
Or do you, yeah, so just record the votes again. So just Goff, Johansson, Chu, McDonald, Major and Kewen. Thank you.
Yeah.
And the so that's carried. The second motion moved by Councillor Goff, seconded Councillor McClellan. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And the third motion, that's moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded Councillor Donovan. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No.
Is that the
That's
same?
carried. And is it the same people? Oh, okay. So it's Goff, Chu, McDonald, Major, and Kewen. Okay, so that's